Hello, friends. Are you ready to explore the fascinating world of Final Destination? Bloodlines? Released on this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're bringing you all the hidden gems, stunning details, and unforgettable moments. If you enjoy this deep dive, be sure to hit that like button. It really helps our channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more exciting movie explorations. Let's jump right in and uncover the magic together. There's something uniquely terrifying about knowing your end is inevitable. That no matter how far you run, how hard you fight, or how desperately you believe in free will, fate has already written your final chapter. That's the unsettling allure that has defined the Final Destination franchise for over 2 decades, and now, in Final Destination. Bloodlines, released on August 15, 2025, the horror returns with renewed intensity, deeper mythology, and a legacy that refuses to die. From the moment the studio announced its revival, anticipation surrounding Bloodlines was electric. After a decade of silence, fans longed to see how the death-defying series would reinvent itself. Would it offer more of the elaborate set pieces and cruelly ironic deaths that made the original so iconic? Would it raise the stakes and deepen the lore, finally offering answers to questions the series had only ever hinted at? The answer, it turns out, is yes on all counts. But Bloodlines doesn't just continue the series, transforms it. Directed by Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein, who previously helmed the high-tension sci-fi thriller Freaks, this entry immediately feels more atmospheric, more grounded in dread than spectacle, while still delivering the visual pyrotechnics fans have come to expect. The directors knew that, in order to truly revitalize the franchise, they had to reach deeper than just a new batch of victims. They had to find the source of the terror, and they did in the blood. The story follows a group of seemingly unconnected individuals brought together by a freak accident at a modern energy research facility. On the surface, it's the perfect storm. A routine tech demonstration gone horribly wrong. Glass shatters, cables snap, and steel beams drop like guillotine blades. In mere moments, chaos erupts and lives are lost, except for a few. Survivors stumble into the daylight, shaken but alive. That survival, however, comes with a cost. And as Final Destination fans already know, death doesn't like to be cheated. But here's where Bloodlines separates itself. These survivors aren't just random. They share something few even realize. They are descendants of people who previously escaped death in the franchise's earlier films. One is the niece of a freeway pileup survivor. Another is the grandson of someone who walked off Flight 180. At first, the connections feel like coincidence, then like curse, and by the time the pieces fall into place, the truth hits like a wrecking ball. Death doesn't forget and it doesn't forgive. It waits. It watches. And now it's come for the blood. This isn't just a thematic twist. It redefines the rules of the entire franchise. Legacy, not luck, becomes the driving force. Fate, it turns out, might not just target individuals, it hunts families. The implications ripple through every scene, elevating the suspense to a new level. Where previous installments focused on individuals dodging doom, Bloodlines introduces generational horror. The sins, or in this case, the survivals of the ancestors revisit the present, leaving a new crop of characters to pay a debt they didn't even know existed. The film introduces us to Cody Blackwell, a promising architecture student plagued by dreams he doesn't understand. After escaping the facility collapse, Cody begins noticing patterns. Near misses, flickering lights, ominous coincidences. Played with a delicate mix of vulnerability and steely resolve by rising star Jaron Thomas, Cody anchors the emotional core of the film. He's not a hero in the traditional sense. He's just a man trying to unravel a mystery that seems written in his blood. Then there's Lena Cruz, an adrenaline-fueled EMT whose brash exterior hides the trauma of watching her mother die in a freak elevator incident. A nod to Final Destination 2. Played by Ana Ortiz, Lena brings fire and heart to the screen, embodying both defiance and fear. She's the first to suspect something unnatural is happening, and her slow realization that she's not just living her own life, but carrying someone else's unfinished business, is one of the film's most poignant arcs. Adding a cerebral edge to the chaos is Dr. Elise Harmon, a forensic psychologist whose obsession with unexplained survival stories leads her to the group. Brilliantly portrayed by Rebecca Ferguson, Harmon's character digs into the historical threads connecting the survivors. Through her, we learn that certain families have long histories of brushes with death, dating back even before Flight 180. Her investigations unearth a chilling theory that perhaps death's design is not just about balance, but about correction. And the further one family tree grows after escaping fate, the more violently death prunes it. Visually, Bloodlines is stunning. Cinematographer Alexander Lehman bathes the film in a stark, ominous palette of shadows and amber tones. Sunlight feels menacing. Reflections are distorted. Even wide open spaces feel claustrophobic, as if the world itself is tightening around the characters. There are moments so tense and artfully staged you forget to breathe. One standout scene takes place in a serene art gallery where a swinging sculpture, an errant spark, and a dripping roof come together in a Rube Goldberg chain of terror that ends with horrifying precision. It's a masterstroke of tension that ranks among the series' best. And yet, the film doesn't lean solely on shock value. It takes time to explore grief, guilt, and the burden of knowing you were never supposed to live. Survivors carry a strange kind of trauma in this world, not just from witnessing death, but from knowing they were meant to be part of it. They see life as borrowed, their existence a fragile miracle on borrowed time. Bloodlines leans into this existential horror, turning what was once a slasher-adjacent gimmick into something deeper and more unnerving. The screenplay, penned by Laurie Evans Taylor and Guy Busick, who previously collaborated on Scream, 2022, is tight, intelligent, and loaded with eerie foreshadowing. Characters are layered, their relationships believable and often heartbreaking. Conversations are filled with references that reward longtime fans while never alienating newcomers. From brief mentions of past survivors to the reappearance of the infamous death premonition visions, the script is rich with connective tissue. Yet it also pushes the narrative forward, daring to question everything we thought we knew about the rules of the game. Twists arrive not with suddenness, but with an eerie inevitability. One particularly haunting moment comes when the characters believe they've found a way to break the pattern, only to realize, too late, that their actions have sealed a worse fate. It's a brutal reminder that in this world, intention means little. Death has already done the math. But perhaps the most brilliant element of Bloodlines is the way it reframes the audience's relationship with the franchise itself. Every near miss feels loaded with potential. Every small detail, a loose screw, a flickering street lamp, becomes a potential executioner. The viewer becomes a participant in the paranoia, scanning the background of every frame, searching for signs. This interactive dread is what has always made Final Destination films unique, and Bloodlines sharpens it to a surgical degree. The film's final act is a devastating crescendo. As the remaining survivors piece together the true purpose of their connection, they come to understand that the only way to end the cycle is not to survive, but to sever the bloodline entirely. It's a gut-wrenching revelation, forcing characters to choose between their own lives and the future of those they've never met. Sacrifice replaces escape as the ultimate defiance. The final scene lingers in silence. No explosions, no screams. Just the quiet realization of what it means to defy death not by running, but by accepting. When the credits roll, you're left with more than just adrenaline. You're left thinking about your own family, your own history, and the invisible threads that may tie you to something far greater and darker than you understand. That's the true horror of Final Destination, Bloodlines. It makes you question not only your future, but your past. So why has this movie captured the attention of audiences across the globe? Because it dares to evolve a franchise without betraying its roots. It respects what came before while boldly carving new paths. It's a horror film with brains, soul, and edge, a rare combination in a genre too often reliant on jump scares and cliches. It's worth diving into because it doesn't just ask what happens when you cheat death. It asks what happens when your ancestors did. It's worth watching because every character isn't just fighting for their life. They're fighting to understand why their life was even spared in the first place. And it's unforgettable because, in true Final Destination fashion, it reminds us that no matter how fast we run, how much we fight, or how deeply we believe in control, there are some forces you just can't escape. Final Destination. Bloodlines is more than a sequel. It's a reckoning. And once you step into its world, you'll never look at your reflection, your family tree, or your morning routine the same way again. The film opens not with chaos, but with stillness. A wide aerial shot drifts slowly over the remote countryside of Kentucky, where wheat fields sway beneath a looming sky. The silence is unnerving, beautiful, yet foreboding. Then, a low mechanical hum breaks the quiet, and we cut to the gleaming glass campus of Halcyon Dynamics, an advanced energy research facility nestled at the edge of the forest. Inside, people buzz with excitement. Today marks the debut of the company's latest renewable energy initiative, one that promises to change the world. Among the employees and invited guests is Cody Blackwell, a reserved but sharply observant architectural intern shadowing Halcyon's lead designer. Played with quiet intensity by Jaron Thomas, Cody is here on a temporary placement, eager to make connections and earn a foothold in his career. But from the beginning, something feels off to him. He watches as engineers run last-minute diagnostics. A welder wipes sweat from his brow. A faulty fuse sparks briefly in the corner, unnoticed. The hum of generators deepens. Cody's gaze lingers, like he's absorbing more than he understands, like he's sensing a pattern before it's even begun. Meanwhile, we meet Lena Cruz, an EMT stationed outside for emergency support. She leans against her rig, joking with her partner, masking a simmering tension beneath her sarcasm. Her backstory trickles in through subtle visual cues. A cracked photo of her mother tucked into her locker, a memorial pin on her jacket. Her mother, we learn later, was killed in a bizarre, unsolved elevator accident, an incident fans will recognize from Final Destination 2. Lena doesn't talk about it, but the weight of legacy hangs around her like armor. Inside, the tour begins. Among the crowd are other figures who will soon become central to the narrative. Zane Kim, a mild-mannered electrical technician with a meticulous streak. India Rao, a cynical tech blogger live-streaming the event for her followers, and Elliot Granger, a brash investor with ties to the facility's funding. They're strangers now, scattered threads waiting to be pulled together. But that's about to change. As the demonstration kicks off, the tension is palpable. Not from within the scene itself, but from the way it's constructed. Director Zach Lipovsky slowly layers detail upon detail, building an invisible lattice of unease. A cracked valve, a drifting helium balloon snagging on an exposed light fixture, a child's shoelace caught in the revolving door. Everything seems benign, yet everything feels dangerous. Cody's attention is drawn to an architectural inconsistency, a steel beam reinforced differently than the others. He frowns, running mental calculations. In a flash, his eyes widen. He sees it, the premonition. The world around him seems to slow, sound warps into a low drone, and in a heartbeat, the sequence plays out in horrifying detail. The energy core overheats. A minor explosion shakes the generator. Sparks ignite a tangle of wires. One engineer slips, falling into a control panel. A fire breaks loose, spreads fast. Panic erupts. The ceiling support buckles where the beam is weakest. Collapses, triggering a cascade. Glass explodes, a lift shaft implodes. Bodies are torn apart in brutal, Rube Goldberg-style precision. And in the climax of this vision, Cody himself is impaled by a shrapnel spike as fire engulfs the building. Then it all snaps back. He's back in the moment, sweating, gasping for breath. The demo hasn't started yet. Everything is quiet again. He stumbles backward, grabs Lena, and yells for everyone to evacuate. Security rushes to detain him, but in the chaos, the exact sequence he envisioned begins to unfold. He and a small group, Lena, Zane, India, and Elliot, manage to escape just as the facility erupts in flames behind them. From a distance, the survivors stand in shock, the inferno painting the sky orange. They don't know it yet, but they've just been marked. The press dubs them the Lucky Five. News segments replay the footage of their escape. Interviews flood in. The survivors become viral sensations. But instead of relief, Cody feels dread. He's been here before, not in this life but in stories, urban legends, reports of people who cheated death only to die days later in strange, implausible ways. He digs into old case files, scouring the internet for patterns. Lena brushes him off at first, attributing his fear to trauma. But then the deaths begin. The first is Zane's coworker, Tasha, who also fled the initial blast but didn't make the press photos. She dies in a freak accident involving a malfunctioning dishwasher and a spilled bottle of detergent. An elaborate, gruesome sequence that ends with her being electrocuted and drowned simultaneously. It's stylized, drawn out, and unmistakably Final Destination. And to Cody, it's confirmation. The pattern is starting again. Lena joins him reluctantly as they visit Zane, who has grown paranoid and reclusive. He's begun mapping out the explosion, trying to understand how and why they survived. He's discovered that the group's positions during the disaster formed a specific order, just like the original crash victims in Flight 180. The sequence is real, and Zane believes he's next. Meanwhile, India Rao returns home to New York, where her follower count has skyrocketed. She leans into the fame, giving podcasts and TikTok explainers on what it felt like to survive fate. But fame can't shield her from what's coming. One night, she prepares a new video in her high-rise apartment. A chain of minor mishaps begins. A spilled drink shorts her lighting rig. A ceiling fan comes loose. A wine glass cracks. She dodges multiple close calls in what feels like a relentless montage of suspense. Finally, she relaxes, thinking she's safe. And then, as she sits near her floor-to-ceiling window, the fan blade, dislodged hours earlier, crashes through the glass and sends her plummeting 20 stories to her death. Her final scream is heard faintly in the background of her still-recording live stream. Cody and Lena watch in horror as the news breaks. The sequence is tightening. The survivors are dying in order just like before. But what unnerves Cody most is something Zane discovers. Each of them has a familial connection to someone who escaped death years ago. Cody's aunt was among the survivors of the bridge collapse from Final Destination 5. Zane's cousin was at the racetrack disaster in the Final Destination. India had a distant uncle from the Route 23 pileup. None of them knew, but death did. This is the turning point in the film, the moment when survival becomes a curse, not a miracle. Cody and Lena begin researching the past survivors. They uncover old newspaper clippings, footage, and even encrypted agency reports that hint at a hidden truth. Death doesn't hunt randomly. It tracks lineage. It marks those who carry the genetic echoes of stolen time. Their search leads them to Dr. Elise Harmon, a clinical psychologist and archivist obsessed with the phenomenon. Elise has spent years piecing together the deaths, noticing patterns even law enforcement missed. Played with steely calm by Rebecca Ferguson, she becomes a reluctant ally. She explains that the phenomenon, what she calls residual reckoning, suggests that death's design operates not just on individuals, but on entire family trees. When someone escapes fate, the branch grows where it should have ended. That anomaly festers over time. Eventually, death comes to prune it. Elise also reveals that she was close friends with Clear Rivers, the only recurring survivor from the original films. Clear kept a journal, documenting everything she learned from Alex Browning and the others. Those entries form the backbone of Elise's research, and they confirm the most chilling truth of all. You can delay death, but you can't outweed it forever. Someone always pays the debt. As Cody processes this revelation, Zane, unable to bear the pressure, decides to flee the country. He boards a train, hoping that distance can break the pattern. But in a beautifully orchestrated sequence that mirrors the mechanical inevitability of the original films, his attempt at escape becomes his undoing. A series of mechanical failures, an overheated wheel, a dropped cell phone, a distracted conductor, results in a derailment. Zane is thrown from the train and lands directly in the path of an automated freight loader, which delivers the final blow. It's brutal, shocking, and timed with surgical precision. Cody and Lena arrive too late, standing in the aftermath of the carnage. They're now the last two, and something has changed in Cody. The quiet intern who once feared the shadows has become something else. An investigator, a strategist, a man staring into the abyss and refusing to blink. He believes he's cracked the order and is convinced that Lena is next. He insists they need to break the chain, but the rules have changed. Sacrifices, life-for-a-life exchanges, even temporary avoidance strategies. They've all been tried before and all have failed. Unless the answer isn't in the order. It's in the blood. As the first half of Final Destination, Bloodlines draws to a close, the tone shifts from reactive to proactive. Analyse presents one final, terrifying possibility. If the bloodline is what's cursed, then maybe the only way to end it is to sever it completely. Not by dying, but by removing the future. No descendants. No branches. No anomalies. It's a hypothesis too horrifying to accept, but one that hangs over the survivors like a storm cloud. The movie ends its first half with Lena returning home alone, trying to keep her distance from everyone she loves. She locks herself away in her apartment, every move cautious, every breath wary. But death is patient. A flicker of light, a slow gas leak, a spark from an old fuse box. The camera lingers on the growing tension. Then cut to black. What happens next will not only determine who lives, but what it means to live under the shadow of a fate you never asked for. As the shadow of death grows heavier and more suffocating, the surviving group finds themselves clinging to threads of hope that are quickly fraying. Liv's discovery of her mother's connection to the 2000 Flight 180 disaster has shifted the entire narrative on its axis. This isn't just about cheating death anymore. It's about unraveling a blood-soaked legacy that stretches across generations. The realization hits hard. Death isn't just finishing what it started. It's cleansing the bloodline, one descendant at a time. The survivors aren't just running from fate. They're running from a curse etched into their very DNA. Tensions skyrocket as Liv and Mason gather the group to share what they've uncovered. The atmosphere is thick with fear and disbelief. Jax, trying to mask his panic with bravado, argues that there has to be a way out. We weren't born just to be picked off like this. But beneath his words is raw terror. Nicole clutches a photograph of her father, a survivor of the original pile-up on Route 23, realizing that every story she heard as a child wasn't just folklore. It was a warning. Then, just as a sliver of unity forms among the group, the next death strikes with surgical precision. Avery, always quiet, always observing, meets her fate in the most haunting way. While on a video call with her brother, a sudden chain reaction caused by a dripping air conditioner, a sparking extension cord, and a leaking fish tank ends with Avery electrocuted in her own bedroom. The screen flickers violently as her brother watches helplessly, the only witness to a death that feels too elaborate to be coincidence. Panic sets in. The group is fracturing. Liv insists they stay together, that isolation is what death wants. But Nicole, overwhelmed and guilt-ridden, disappears into the night, convinced she's next. That's when the story pivots once again. Not into chaos, but into revelation. Mason dives deeper into newspaper archives, using the local library's microfiche system to trace Death's path. What he discovers is horrifying. Not only has every major Final Destination incident resulted in deaths of survivors, but in the following decades, their children have died too, sometimes years apart, sometimes within days of each other. The pattern is there, cold and irrefutable. Death doesn't forget. It waits. Meanwhile, Liv returns home to confront her grandmother, an aging but sharp-witted woman who's long been the keeper of secrets. The confrontation is quiet, intense, filled with pauses heavy enough to bend time. Her grandmother finally confesses. Your mother was supposed to die on that plane. She had a vision. She warned them, but she wasn't supposed to survive. None of them were. Liv demands answers. Why didn't you tell me? Her grandmother's response is chilling. Because I hoped you'd never find out, that you could live outside its reach. But you can't escape what's in your blood. Just then, another thread of fate unravels. Jax, chasing Nicole after receiving a panicked voice memo, finds her car wrecked in a ravine, the tire marks suggesting she swerved violently. He climbs down, calling her name, But what he finds is worse than a fatal crash. Nicole is still alive. For now. The tree that speared through her windshield narrowly missed her. She's in shock, trembling, whispering, "It skipped me. It wasn't my turn." And then the final twist of the knife. Just as Jax reaches her, trying to pull her to safety, the car slips, rolls, and explodes in a burst of flame. Jax survives. Nicole doesn't. This is when desperation reaches its peak. Liv, Jax, and Mason regroup at the old emergency response center where her mother once worked. They aren't looking for safety anymore. They're hunting for understanding, some logic in an utterly illogical cycle. They spread out timelines, photos, survivor lists. That's when Mason finds it. A near-forgotten survivor from the 180 crash who was later institutionalized after claiming death spoke to him. He died years later, supposedly of natural causes. But in his final days, he drew dozens of diagrams, sequences, and notes connecting survivors and their children. Liv reads them aloud. Blood is a tether. When fate is altered, the blood tries to correct it. We aren't being punished. We're being recalibrated. The concept is mind-bending, but it makes sense. Death's design isn't just about order. It's about restoring balance. If one person cheats fate, the ripples go down the line, infecting generations. And those echoes must be silenced. Jax, overwhelmed, punches a hole in the wall, only to uncover an old emergency exit blueprint. His eyes widen. There's a sealed-off sublevel beneath the building, one used during the Flight 180 aftermath for containment. Intrigued and terrified, they break in. Dust and decay cover everything. But among the files and decomposing binders is a single tape recorder, still intact. They hit play. A voice speaks. It's Liv's mother. The recording is a private confession, her final words before she vanished in 2010. She speaks of dreams she couldn't explain, visions of her daughter dying before she even learned to walk. She talks about trying to stop it, about doing everything she could to change fate. But her final words are the most haunting. I tried to break the chain, couldn't, but maybe you can live. Maybe you can finish what I couldn't. Armed with the truth and almost no time left, Liv and Mason track down the final member of their group, a reclusive teen named Theo, who's gone completely off-grid. He's built a bunker in the woods, convinced that isolation will protect him. But when Liv finds him, it's already too late. A gas leak, triggered by a malfunctioning generator and a misplaced propane tank, leads to an explosion that lights the night sky. Theo's paranoia couldn't save him. The design caught up. Back in town, Liv and Jax sit on the edge of a rooftop, watching the sun rise. They know they're the last two. They've exhausted every clue, every theory. But then, Jax remembers something Nicole once said. What if dying out of order resets the pattern? Could it be that sacrifice, true, willing sacrifice, might realign the design? Liv begs him not to consider it. They've come too far. But Jax, ever the protector, smiles sadly. Someone's gotta stop this. And maybe if I do, it'll end with me. Before Liv can stop him, Jax jumps. But fate, cruel as ever, intervenes. A window washer's platform breaks his fall. He lives. And that's when they realize death doesn't accept sacrifices that aren't its own. You can't cheat the design willingly. You can't give your life. It has to be taken. The final scene is both devastating and poetic. Liv, walking alone through the remnants of the emergency center, comes across one last letter from her mother, tucked in a first aid kit. It reads, "If death is balance, then love is chaos. And chaos might be the only way to win." Suddenly, a distant sound, creaking pipes, a flickering light. A final Rube Goldberg sequence of terror begins to unfold, triggered by something as mundane as a dropped pen rolling across the floor. Liv watches in horror as the sequence inches toward her. But then, in a final act of defiance, she steps out of its path, pushes a metal cabinet aside, and jams a gear in the building's fuse box, interrupting the chain. And everything stops. The screen fades to black. We hear the faintest sound. Liv's breath, still steady. For the first time, maybe ever, someone interrupted the design. But in the Final Destination universe, peace is always temporary. As credits roll, we cut to an airport, another family boarding a flight, unaware that the child in tow is the great-grandchild of a Flight 180 survivor. The bloodline may have been slowed, but death is always patient. From the moment Liv Harper steps onto the screen, there's a quiet intensity in her gaze that sets her apart. She's not the typical horror final girl. She's more grounded, more observant, with an instinct that feels born, not learned. Played with remarkable depth by Isabella Merced, Liv isn't defined by fear. She's shaped by something deeper, something ancestral. There's a tension in her performance that simmers just beneath the surface. A weight she doesn't even realize she carries until her mother's past crashes into her present. Her arc is not about discovering strength but awakening it, like it's always been there, passed down through whispered warnings and untold stories. Liv becomes the emotional nucleus of the film, not just because she's central to the bloodline, but because she feels human in a story governed by the inhuman laws of fate. Watching Liv evolve is like watching someone uncover a mystery they didn't want to solve, but have no choice but to finish. At first, her reactions feel instinctual. Fear, disbelief, denial. But gradually, as each death builds upon the last, something shifts. Her fear calcifies into defiance. She doesn't just want to survive. She wants to understand, to undo the invisible chains that have been tightening around her entire life. Merced's ability to hold pain in her eyes while masking it with resolve adds an incredible weight to the role. Even in silence, she speaks volumes. And then there's Mason, the reluctant intellect of the group, played with understated brilliance by Justice Smith. He's not fearless, far from it, but there's something noble in his fear. He doesn't run from it, he channels it. Mason begins as the quiet friend, the background thinker who everyone turns to when they don't understand the rules. But beneath that stillness is a mind racing to connect the dots, to decode the pattern before it consumes them all. Smith plays Mason with a layered anxiety that never feels performative. It's raw, and it deepens with every scene. His arc is about acceptance, not just of death's design, but of his own role in facing it. He becomes Liv's counterpart, not romantically, but emotionally. They're two sides of the same survival instinct, one fueled by fire, the other by logic. Mason's standout moment, his discovery of the sublevel beneath the emergency center, feels like a culmination of every silent observation he's made. He's not just researching anymore. He's confronting truth. And as he reads through the last words of a man driven mad by patterns, Smith allows just a flicker of vulnerability to bleed through, reminding us that intelligence isn't immunity. It's just another lens through which to witness inevitable tragedy. Jax, the heart-pumping wild card of the trio, bursts onto the scene like a bolt of adrenaline. Portrayed by Mason Gooding, Jax is the most emotionally reactive of the group, and yet his performance never tips into cliché. What makes Jax so compelling is the tension between his impulsive nature and his deeply buried emotional scars. He talks big, laughs loud, and acts fast, but every decision is laced with fear. Gooding brings a physicality to the role that makes his desperation feel visceral. You believe he'd jump in front of a car for his friends. You believe he'd try to cheat death by daring it to catch him first. But Jax's arc isn't about becoming brave. He already is, it's just masked in misdirection. His journey is about confronting the illusion of control. His near-death scene, where he attempts to sacrifice himself, shatters that illusion. The gut punch comes not from the fall itself, but from the fact that he survives it. Death rejects his offer. And in that moment, Gooding lets the weight of helplessness settle on Jax's shoulders like a storm. It's a heartbreaking transformation, from protector to pawn, and he wears it with haunted defiance. Then there's Nicole, played by Liana Liberato, a character whose presence is quiet but searing. She's the emotional compass of the group, deeply tethered to her past but desperately trying to outrun it. Nicole doesn't seek answers like Liv or control like Mason. She seeks clarity. She wants to know why, because in the absence of meaning, grief becomes unbearable. Liberato infuses Nicole with a soft intensity, a presence that always feels on the verge of unraveling. And when she finally breaks, fleeing the group, confronting the specter of her own death, her vulnerability feels earned. Her death scene in the ravine isn't just tragic because she dies. It's tragic because she finally felt hope. She thought she had been skipped. That false reprieve makes her end sting even more. Among the supporting cast, Avery, portrayed by Jenna Ortega, leaves a lasting impression despite limited screen time. She's not just the tech-savvy friend or the quiet observer. She's the mirror to the audience. Her death, captured mid-video call, is a grim reminder of the randomness of fate. Ortega plays Avery with a sense of calm tension, always one step ahead in observation, but never quite able to escape the dread lurking just behind her eyes. Her final moment is a masterclass in suspense. No screaming, no fanfare, just a flickering screen, a broken connection, and the stunned silence of a sibling who witnesses what no one should. Theo, the bunker-dwelling survivalist, adds a different energy to the narrative. His paranoia is extreme, but in this world, it's justified. His brief time on screen adds texture to the group dynamic. He represents what happens when fear becomes your identity. His death, sudden and explosive, underscores the film's cold truth. No amount of preparation matters when you're part of the design. What elevates Final Destination? Bloodlines beyond its chilling set pieces is how its characters feel like real people, not just names on a kill list. Their choices feel natural, their fears deeply relatable. You don't watch them die with detachment. You wince, you grieve, you shout at the screen, hoping they'll dodge that final twist of fate. The performances are a large part of that. There's a maturity in the casting actors who carry depth even in the quietest moments. The chemistry between Liv, Mason, and Jax is especially magnetic. Their camaraderie feels lived in. When they argue, it's not just tension. It's pain colliding with fear. When they laugh, it's a fragile rebellion against the terror surrounding them. And then, there's the specter of Liv's mother, a presence that looms over the entire film without ever stepping fully into the light. Through flashbacks, audio recordings, and whispers from the past, she becomes more than a ghost. She becomes the catalyst for everything. Her voice, gentle but fraught, is a haunting echo that fuels Liv's every decision. The actress who portrays her, though seen sparingly, delivers a performance that is chilling in its calmness. She isn't scared of death. She's scared of what her survival cost. Even the minor characters, background friends, unlucky strangers, fleeting passengers, feel real. Their deaths aren't for spectacle. They're reminders of the chaos that comes with tampering with fate. Every scene is a brushstroke in a larger mural of inevitability. And every character is a fragment of that mural, shaping it, coloring it, sometimes trying to tear it down. In the end, Bloodlines doesn't just succeed because of its clever kills or chilling atmosphere. It succeeds because it treats its characters like people first and victims second. You don't watch to see how they die. You watch because you care if they live. That emotional investment transforms this chapter in the Final Destination saga into something more than horror. It becomes mythic, a story about legacy, choice, fear, and ultimately, the unbreakable will to survive even when fate has already written the ending. From the very first frame of Final Destination, Bloodlines, there's a sense that this isn't just a continuation, it's a return. A return not only to the legacy of fate and mortality, but to a rich lineage of visual cues, buried clues, and interwoven mythology that pays homage to every entry before it. Director Zach Lipovsky and writer Guy Busick didn't just craft a horror movie. They constructed a living, breathing maze of nods, winks, and whispers that reward the sharp-eyed and longtime fans of the franchise. Beneath every shadow, behind every line of dialogue, lies a breadcrumb leading either forward into mystery or backward into history. It begins in the prologue, a seemingly innocuous shot of a highway sign welcoming us to Copperhead, Louisiana. But that name isn't random. It's a subtle allusion to serpentine fate, the way danger slithers silently through life, striking when least expected. Dig deeper, and you'll find that Copperhead also references the train derailment from Final Destination 3, where a survivor named Perry had an unspoken fear of snakes, an oblique reference to the series' habit of using phobias as portents of doom. The location itself, a sleepy southern town with decaying historical roots, mirrors the idea that death doesn't strike in the center of chaos. It slithers through calm, just before the storm. In Liv Harper's bedroom, one detail quietly foreshadows her family's deep entanglement with death's design. A cracked snow globe sits on her nightstand. Inside it, a miniature roller coaster. To the average viewer, it's a dusty trinket. But for seasoned fans, it's a visual echo of Final Destination 3's infamous opening sequence. What makes it eerie is the fact that this globe belonged to Liv's mother, a survivor of that same disaster, though the film never overtly says so. It doesn't need to. The shattered glass, the rusted coaster, and the faint sound of wind whistling through the globe's broken seam says enough. Her mother was there. She didn't die, but something followed her home. The death sequences, while brutal and brilliantly choreographed, are packed with layered callbacks to the franchise's legacy. Take Jax's near death in the construction site. As he slips toward a pile of rebar, the camera cuts to a falling nail gun, an unmistakable homage to Final Destination 3's grisly hardware store demise. But this time it misses, on purpose, because Bloodlines plays with expectation like a conductor plays with silence before a crescendo. It's not just about how characters die. It's about how they almost die, luring the audience into false relief before turning the blade. Perhaps the most meticulously constructed sequence belongs to Nicole's death at the ravine. As she steps out of the car, viewers may catch the flicker of a dragonfly hovering above the windshield. A subtle nod to Final Destination 1, where a dragonfly buzzed by Alex Browning before the plane explosion. It's a symbol that's always meant impending doom. Its presence is fleeting, its meaning often missed. In Nicole's case, it hovers for mere seconds before the wind picks up, a branch cracks, and the chain reaction begins. She never sees it, but we do. And in that moment, the past bleeds into the present. The production design is layered with these ghosts of previous installments. The town's emergency coordination center, once used for hurricane evacuations, is littered with faded safety posters, one of which includes a grainy image of the McKinley Speedway from Final Destination 4. The sign reads, "Know your exits. You might not get another chance." It's half obscured by mildew, half ripped by time, but its placement isn't accidental. The irony that a place meant for safety becomes the site of destruction is the franchise's eternal theme, and here it's painted across the walls. There's also the matter of Liv's vision, her premonition that launches the entire spiral. Unlike previous films, where visions came in fragmented cuts and abstract angles, hers is almost cinematic in its flow. There's a deliberate rhythm to it, and that's because, according to production notes, it was choreographed to mirror the editing structure of the original plane sequence from Final Destination 2000. Even the sound design borrows faint echoes of that first explosion. The creaking of metal, the scream of wind, the low rumble of something ancient and mechanical awakening. These aren't just homages, they're coded messages for those who've traveled this road before. In Mason's research scenes, the Easter eggs begin to multiply. As he digs through records in the town archive, one file folder briefly reveals the name L. Carter, a possible reference to Alex Browning's alias from Final Destination 2's deleted scenes. A moment later, he flips to a death certificate from 2001, with the name Kimberly Corman partially visible. It's never mentioned, never zoomed in on, but for anyone who knows Kimberly's fate after Final Destination 2, the inclusion is chilling. She was one of the few who thought she beat the pattern, only to vanish from official record. In Bloodlines, it's as though all those survivors, Alex, Clear, Kimberly, have been swept under death's carpet, lingering only in dusty files and fading whispers. One of the most brilliant hidden threads lies in the clock motif. From the film's opening to its devastating conclusion, clocks malfunction, tick backward, or skip seconds. In the classroom, the bell rings early. In the diner, the jukebox skips to a 2000s pop song, Into the Void, a track previously used in Final Destination 5. Even Liv's wristwatch stops for 3 seconds before Avery's shocking death. These aren't glitches, they're warnings. In this world, time isn't linear. It's a spiral, and every skipped beat is death adjusting the rhythm. A particularly haunting sequence involves Mason decoding the work of a deceased survivor named Elias. His journal is filled with erratic symbols, spirals, and coordinates, but on one page, there's a hand-drawn image of a bridge collapse, almost identical to the one seen in Final Destination 5. Below it is written, "They were wrong. The bridge was not the end. It was the beginning of the cycle." This quote, hidden deep in a prop journal, suggests that the timeline from Final Destination 5 feeds directly into Bloodlines. In fact, the final twist of FD5, that it was a prequel to the first film, now echoes forward into the idea that Death's design doesn't operate in a straight line. It loops, and some Bloodlines are cursed to ride it repeatedly. Another fascinating symbolic thread is color. The use of red and white becomes a visual code for incoming danger. In every major death sequence, red objects subtly line the frame. Red cups at the party, red shoes near the escalator, red signage behind Nicole before she dies. White, meanwhile, represents false safety. The emergency center's white hallways, the white sheets covering the windows in Liv's childhood home. As Mason notes, death hides in clean places. That color symbolism, rooted in cinematic language rather than dialogue, elevates the tension without ever drawing overt attention. Then there's the train sequence. While seemingly a standalone escape attempt, fans may notice the train's logo bears the letters MVA, Metro Valley Authority. That same train company appeared in the Final Destination, 2009, as the backdrop to one character's demise. Its inclusion here isn't just world building. It's timeline reinforcement. All these stories exist in the same universe, quietly stitched together by logos, names, and background details that make the Final Destination franchise feel like a macabre cinematic ecosystem. Even the soundtrack carries embedded references. During Liv's flashback to her mother, a faint melody plays in the background. Strings and piano, soft and eerie. That melody, a slowed-down, reversed version of Final Destination 3's opening theme. Composer Bear McCreary, known for his intricate thematic layering, reportedly reversed the motif to symbolize fate folding back on itself. It's the kind of detail that would never register consciously, but emotionally, it locks the audience into the franchise's DNA without them even knowing. There's also an unexpected nod to real-world history. A radio broadcast midway through the film references a chemical spill that occurred just outside Mount Abraham. That's a fictional town used in My Bloody Valentine, 1981, and again in its 2009 remake, suggesting Bloodlines plays in the same shared horror sandbox. It's a playful Easter egg, yes, but also a subtle commentary. In horror, no town is truly isolated, and death may have many names. One blink and you miss it reference comes during the closing credits. A series of surveillance footage clips play over the names, and in one shot, a gas station on the outskirts of town, a woman who looks suspiciously like Clear Rivers passes behind the pumps. This never confirmed. Her face is shadowed, but she wears a jacket that bears the same logo seen in FD2. Whether it's fan service or a hint that Clear somehow escaped, the ambiguity makes it linger. And perhaps the most chilling meta-reference is hidden in the final shot. A newspaper clipping pinned to the wall of Elias' bunker. It reads, "Time of death, unknown." That phrase appears in nearly every Final Destination film, either in autopsy reports or death scene coverage. But here, it's underlined, circled, and written again in the margins. Because it never ends. As the camera pulls back, the phrase repeats, whispering over the sound mix like an incantation. It's not just a closing line. It's the promise of continuation. In Final Destination, Bloodlines, death isn't the only constant, detail is. Every shot, every prop, every whispered line contains the ghosts of stories past and the seeds of stories yet to come. It's a film designed to be watched, rewatched, and then rewatched again, each time uncovering another layer, another symbol, another breadcrumb left by filmmakers who clearly love this universe. And when you finally think you've seen it all, when the credits roll and silence returns, you realize the truth buried beneath it all. Death doesn't forget, and neither does the design. There's always a kind of poetic irony to making a film about death. A film where fate is inescapable, accidents are elaborate riddles, and even a loose screw can become a death sentence. But behind the cold precision of every on-screen demise in Final Destination, Bloodlines, there was real chaos, real risk, and a production that, at times, seemed to flirt with the very curse it depicted. This wasn't just another horror sequel. This was the return of a franchise that had been dormant for over a decade. And with that return came passion, fear, and an uncanny number of eerie coincidences that blurred the line between fiction and reality. Director Zach Lipovsky and co-writer Guy Busick didn't initially set out to direct a Final Destination film. In fact, the project was originally envisioned as a reboot, something more detached, experimental, and tonally separate from the saga's core DNA. But once Lipovsky and Busick were attached, they insisted that the film had to feel connected. They wanted it to bleed with the spirit of the originals, while also carving out its own legacy. This decision led to the pivotal concept of the bloodline, a metaphorical and literal inheritance of fate, which became the creative backbone of the entire story. The casting of Breck Basinger as Liv Harper wasn't just a practical choice, it was a full-circle moment. Basinger, known for her work on Stargirl, had grown up watching the Final Destination films. In interviews, she described how Final Destination 3 left her so terrified she avoided tanning beds for years. So when the audition sides landed in her hands, she recognized the tone immediately and fought for the role. It said she sent in 3 different audition tapes, each one showcasing a different emotional shade of Liv: fragile, rebellious, traumatized. The role was hers before the final round even ended. Behind the camera, one of the most demanding challenges was crafting the film's signature death set pieces. The production team, led by special effects supervisor Gary Elmendorf, faced a dilemma. How do you outdo over 2 decades worth of cinematic deaths without descending into parody or overindulgence? The answer came from an unexpected source: Rube Goldberg machines. The intricate, chain-reaction-style engineering became the inspiration for each major death. Elmendorf and his team built full-scale physical models of each scene using wooden planks, dominoes, springs, and pulleys to simulate cause-and-effect logic before even filming a single frame. They weren't just storyboarding scenes, they were building them like puzzles. The opening disaster, the county fair explosion, was the most logistically difficult sequence in the entire movie. Shot over 12 nights in rural Georgia, the crew had to construct a fake fairground complete with operational rides, vendor booths, and a functioning sound system. The carousel was real. The Ferris wheel was retrofitted with safety controls but could spin at full speed. Every fireworks scene exploding in the air was a practical effect, not CGI. On the first night of filming, a storm rolled in and short-circuited half the lighting rig. Filming was halted, but as they waited in the dark, lightning split the sky, and Lipovsky, always the opportunist, rolled cameras anyway. That strike ended up in the final cut. Cast member Chandler Riggs, playing Mason, brought more than just acting talent to the table. As a longtime horror fan and Walking Dead alumnus, he was intimately familiar with the genre's nuances. Riggs reportedly assisted in brainstorming alternate endings and contributed to a scrapped sequence where Mason survives but receives a phone call featuring distorted audio from past survivors. Though the scene never made it into the final cut, the audio file, titled Echoes of Design .wave, can be heard faintly in the background during the bunker scene near the end, layered under the sound mix. It was Riggs' idea to hide it there as a reward for headphone-wearing fans. The town of Copperhead, Louisiana wasn't found on any map because it didn't exist. The production actually shot in Covington, Georgia, and painstakingly dressed it to reflect a southern bayou community recovering from a major flood. The attention to detail went so deep that local extras were given custom ID badges, police insignia, and newspaper clippings with fictional town names just in case the camera caught an accidental background close-up. The team even replaced real street signs with aged, cracked versions that referenced other Final Destination settings. One street was named Val Luton Avenue, a tribute to the character from the first film and to the real-life horror producer from the 1940s. While most of the film's death sequences were designed in pre-production, one was entirely improvised 2 weeks before shooting wrapped. A scene originally written as a simple monologue for Nicole was replaced with an elaborate escapement mechanism gone wrong involving a washing machine, a hairdryer, and a set of metal beads. The idea came from a crew member who told a story about a real-life laundry accident. That anecdote became the foundation for one of the most chilling and unexpected deaths in the film. It wasn't in the original script. It wasn't budgeted, but it became one of the film's most talked about moments. Strangely enough, the crew experienced several accidents and near misses during production that had some whispering about a real-life Final Destination curse. During a location scout, a van carrying second unit crew blew a tire on a gravel road and narrowly missed a drop-off. No one was harmed, but the incident rattled the team enough to prompt a ceremonial cleansing of the set, organized by a local spiritual advisor. It wasn't for publicity, it was for peace of mind. And though nothing else major occurred, several crew members reported recurring dreams of clocks stopping or birds flying into windows, echoing imagery from the franchise itself. The spiral symbol, which appears repeatedly throughout the film, was a late addition. Writer Guy Busick has admitted in interviews that the symbol originally held no meaning, but during location scouting, they came across a local artist's sculpture garden filled with spiral patterns. The image struck him. A spiral represented something with no end, always feeding back into itself. That became the metaphor for death's design, not linear, but recursive. As a tribute, the production team hired the same local artist to design spiral motifs hidden across the set, from graffiti on bathroom stalls to the ironwork on a balcony. Viewers who pause carefully will notice over 30 spirals scattered across the film. There's also a fascinating bit of trivia involving the film's end credits scene. A short, grainy video plays in reverse, showing what appears to be a survivor from an earlier Final Destination film, but her identity is left ambiguous. The actress featured was actually a body double, with her face digitally obscured. But the footage itself is real, shot in 2005 for a documentary about the original trilogy that was never released. The filmmakers discovered the footage in New Line Cinema's archives and decided to repurpose it as a haunting bridge between the new film and the old mythology. The decision wasn't just stylistic, it was thematic. Death never erases. It remembers. The film's visual aesthetic, dark and rich with amber hues, was influenced by 1970s photography and Southern Gothic horror. Cinematographer Mandy Walker cited Gordon Willis, the Prince of Darkness, as a key inspiration. Walker used low-key lighting setups, oil lamp-style practicals, and an old-school lens filter called a glimmer glass to give the film its slightly dreamlike glow. This aesthetic decision was vital. It made even the brightest scenes feel like twilight, as if the sun was always just about to set. It created a world suspended between life and death, a world where you could never quite trust the light. Even the title sequence was a labor of love. The team hired designer Kyle Cooper, who created the iconic credits for Say 7 End, to craft a visual language that evoked fate's invisible hand. The result: blood moving in slow motion through veins, morphing into threads of red silk that twist into the spiral symbol. It's elegant, morbid, and hypnotic. What most viewers don't realize is that the sequence includes hidden names, the surnames of every major Final Destination survivor, dissolved in fractal glass. You'd need to pause and enhance to see them, but they're there, clear. Alex, Kimberly, Nick, Sam, Olivia, all floating, all waiting. The film almost had a completely different ending. In early drafts, Liv sacrifices herself to stop the pattern, and the film ends with a montage of future generations finally living free. But test audiences found it too neat, too resolved. Lipovsky agreed. He wanted the ending to haunt. So the final scene was rewritten to show the spiral restarting, with a new child witnessing a premonition, suggesting that the bloodline lives on. The idea wasn't to depress audiences. It was to remind them that death's design isn't a villain. It's a system, a machine, one that never stops turning. In perhaps the most surreal twist of all, the premiere of Final Destination, Bloodlines in Los Angeles was almost canceled due to a power outage caused by a malfunctioning transformer just down the block. As the red carpet was rolled out, the lights dimmed, the screen went dark, and a hush fell over the crowd. Someone joked that death didn't want the story told. But then the backup generators kicked in, the film played as scheduled, and the story began with a shot of a light flickering out. That's Final Destination, Bloodlines, a film born from reverence and reinvention. A project that not only embraced its past but was shaped by real-world echoes of the very themes it explores. Every decision, every challenge, every eerie coincidence served as a reminder that sometimes, fiction doesn't need to try too hard to feel real. Because when you're making a movie about fate, you might just feel like you're part of its design. It begins with a flicker, a child's fleeting vision of fire, metal, and blood colors that shouldn't blend, yet always do in the world of Final Destination. That flicker becomes the first domino in a sequence meticulously laid by fate itself. And though the county fair explosion might seem like a familiar entry into the franchise's tradition of grand opening disasters, this one pulses with a different energy. It isn't just spectacle. It's legacy. The fair, filled with laughter, neon glow, and Americana innocence, becomes a crucible of death. But this time, the premonition isn't shown from a grown-up's eyes. It belongs to Mason, a teenager just old enough to understand fear but too young to process the weight of inevitability. This shift reframes everything. When the carousel breaks free, the Ferris wheel implodes, and a fireworks stand erupts into a rain of embers. It's not just chaos. It's a child's nightmare coming true. This moment sets the emotional tone. This story will deal with inherited trauma, with bloodlines, with cycles that never break easily. Critically, the choice to shoot the premonition and real disaster from nearly identical angles, only subtly different in pacing and sound, serves a deeper purpose. It isn't about fooling the audience. It's about anchoring us in inevitability. The moment the real explosion unfolds, there's a sinking dread, not because it's shocking, but because we knew it was coming and were powerless to stop it. This is the core emotional hook that Bloodlines nails more precisely than its predecessors. Inevitability doesn't shout. It whispers, and when it finally screams, it's already too late. The group's escape from the fairgrounds becomes the first fracture in their collective psyche. The survivors, Liv, Mason, Nicole, and Elias, aren't united by friendship or even common goals. They're tethered by fear. And that fracture deepens in the film's next major turning point, Elias's death at the auto shop. Mechanically, it's one of the most meticulously constructed sequences in the series. A dance of heat, pressure, and misdirection. But emotionally, it's the first moment that shatters the character's illusion of control. Elias, older and hardened, is the group's voice of skeptical reason. He dismisses the rules, mocks the idea of death's design, and insists life is random. But when a jack slips, a car descends, and a burst of compressed air sends shrapnel through his jaw, that cynicism dies with him. His death is shocking not for its gore, but for its irony. He had the chance to believe. He chose not to, and the price was silence forever. This moment hits hard for the audience because Elias felt safe. He was grounded, and if someone like him can't outsmart fate, what hope is there? The morgue scene marks a tonal shift, and perhaps the film's most subtle yet powerful piece of character evolution. Liv and Nicole, having broken into the city morgue to uncover death patterns from past autopsy records, are no longer passive. They're detectives now. Survivors turned scholars trying to decode death like a language. This scene, underpinned by the cold blue lighting and rhythmic hum of fluorescent buzz, plays less like horror and more like procedural dread. It's a slow burn, drawing viewers into the intellectual side of survival. But the brilliance lies in its restraint. Rather than hammering the audience with exposition, the film lets subtext do the heavy lifting. Liv finds a folder that reveals her own aunt was one of the original 2000s crash survivors. A throwaway line. Faded photo. A woman standing behind Alex Browning on a plane stairwell in archival footage. Suddenly, Liv's obsession makes sense. She wasn't just caught in fate. She was born into it. This single reveal turns her arc from reactionary to ancestral. Her story isn't about escaping death. It's about finally understanding it. Then comes the hardware store sequence, perhaps the film's most layered death scene. On the surface, it's pure Final Destination. A dropped wrench, a faulty sprinkler system, and an angle grinder that slices through bone like butter. But beneath the mechanics is an emotional heartbeat. Nicole's death isn't framed with distance. We stay with Liv the entire time, watching her scream through a window she can't break, paralyzed by glass and consequence. The tension isn't just about if Nicole will die. It's about what Liv will become when she does. Critically, this moment isn't about the gore. It's about helplessness. And that helplessness transforms Liv. This is when she stops surviving and starts fighting. It's when the film shifts from a death count narrative to a moral war, one fought against inevitability, but also against surrender. One of the most narratively satisfying moments is also one of the quietest. A midpoint scene where Mason and Liv sit beneath an abandoned water tower, reading names from the town's disaster memorial. Mason asks why fate would choose them, why they were spared. Liv answers, maybe because someone else wasn't. It's a simple line, but one that carries the film's thematic soul. This isn't a story about punishment. It's about debt, about inherited guilt, and about trying to pay back what can't be paid. That conversation subtly foreshadows the film's climactic twist, the revelation that Liv's mother faked her death after escaping a prior chain of deaths decades ago, abandoning her family to avoid detection. The film could have treated this twist as soap opera shock, but instead, it plays the scene like a ghost story. Liv confronts her in a storm-racked chapel. Candles flicker, rain lashes the windows, and her mother whispers, "I tried to outrun it, but it always finds a way." This twist recontextualizes everything. The bloodline isn't just metaphor. It's a literal link to past survivors. Liv was born into the design, and her mother's attempt to break free only doomed them both. The emotional weight of this revelation is immense. Not just for Liv, but for the audience. We thought we were watching a survivor story, but we were watching a legacy tale. And that legacy is lined with loss. The bunker finale is where all threads converge, narrative, emotional, thematic. Liv, Mason, and a now crippled town inspector attempt to cheat death by sealing themselves in a concrete storm shelter during a meteorological anomaly, believing that by removing themselves from the world entirely, they can short-circuit fate. This idea, complete isolation as protection, mirrors pandemic-era anxieties about survival through disconnection. But what makes the scene devastating isn't its concept. It's its denial. The bunker begins to flood, pressure builds, pipe bursts, and then, in a cruel twist of irony, it isn't fate that kills Mason. It's Liv's own action, trying to break open the exit too soon. The message is chilling. Even resistance has consequences. Fate doesn't always need theatrics. Sometimes it just needs impatience. But the film doesn't end with Mason's death. It ends in the nursery. Months later, Liv is alive. So is the baby, a child born into the shadow of death. And as she watches a mobile spin above the crib, spiral-shaped, slow, hypnotic, she sees a flicker in her peripheral vision. A flash, a crash, a toy falling without cause. Nothing fatal, but enough to know it's starting again. This final moment is haunting not for its violence, but for its stillness. It's the film whispering that legacy doesn't end with survival. Continues in memory, in fear, in vigilance. The spiral keeps spinning. From a critical perspective, Final Destination, Bloodlines succeeds because it doesn't just deliver death, it delivers consequence. Each major scene serves more than a body count. The fair disaster teaches us about fate's inescapability. Elias's death teaches us about the cost of denial. Nicole's tragedy teaches helplessness. The morgue teaches history. The chapel teaches inheritance. And the bunker teaches futility. Together, these scenes form a tapestry not of horror, but of cosmic structure. A system that humbles every character, and by extension, the viewer. For longtime fans, the key moments pay homage to franchise tradition, while also elevating the material emotionally. For newcomers, they're emotionally resonant enough to create investment even without nostalgia. That's the true genius of Bloodlines. It doesn't rely on past films. It echoes them, like ripples from an unseen stone dropped long ago. And in the end, when the screen fades to black and we're left with only the faint sound of ticking, A clock with no hands. We realized something. We didn't just watch a horror film. We watched a cycle, a rhythm, a song written in the language of tragedy, one that never really ends. Before a single camera rolled, before bloodlines were drawn or destinies tangled, the team behind Final Destination, Bloodlines, knew they were walking into sacred territory. This wasn't just another horror sequel. It was an inheritance, and with it came the responsibility of honoring a legacy while breathing new life into it. That ethos, respect for tradition, courage to innovate, would define every step of production, from the earliest drafts to the final chilling frame. The idea of grounding the new installment in family lineage came directly from returning producer Craig Perry, a longtime guardian of the franchise. Perry, together with director Zach Lipovsky, wanted to evolve the formula without abandoning its roots. We realized that death's design was always passed from one survivor to another, Lipovsky said in an interview. But what if it was passed through blood? What if surviving wasn't the end, but the beginning of a generational curse? That philosophical pivot became the cornerstone of Bloodlines, and it would shape every artistic and technical decision thereafter. The casting process alone reflected this new depth. When auditioning for Live, the filmmakers weren't just looking for someone who could scream convincingly. They were looking for someone who could carry the weight of inherited trauma. Riley McDonald, a rising talent from indie dramas, brought a mix of vulnerability and defiance that instantly won over the creative team. She reportedly improvised the now iconic line, "Maybe we were saved because someone else wasn't," during her callback, a moment that made it directly into the script. That line, both simple and devastating, encapsulated the film's emotional architecture. And it came from a place of raw truth. But if emotion grounded the film, engineering gave it wings. No scene exemplified this more than the county fair disaster. A 12-minute set piece that pushed the franchise's visual effects and stunt coordination to unprecedented levels. To capture the visceral chaos of a fairground unraveling, the production team built over 60% of the environment practically on a decommissioned airfield in Georgia. Real rides were refurbished and rigged for controlled destruction, while a team of over 40 stunt performers rehearsed for months to execute near-impossible choreography. The most ambitious piece? The Ferris will collapse, a centerpiece moment where a loaded gondola detaches and rolls through the crowd before crashing into a popcorn stand. Rather than relying solely on CGI, the filmmakers built a 28-foot half-wheel rig on a gimbal and mounted it on hydraulic tracks. The gondola's rolling path was mapped using previs software, and stunt doubles practiced tumbling away from its trajectory dozens of times before the cameras rolled. The result is a breathtaking scene that feels tactile, dangerous, and thrilling, because most of it really happened. Cinematographer Kareem Hussein, best known for his work on Possessor and The Empty Man, brought a surreal and painterly quality to the imagery. Working closely with production designer Melanie Jones, he adopted a visual motif of curves and spirals, evoking the film's themes of inevitability and circular fate. You can see it in the swirling lights of the fair, the twisted metal of broken rides, even the spiral staircase in Liv's house. Hussein utilized wide-angle lenses and steady push-ins to evoke a constant feeling of being watched or pulled forward by an unseen force. "It's like the camera was part of death's design," he once said. "We wanted it to feel like fate itself was creeping in frame by frame." Sound design played just as crucial a role. Supervising sound editor Trevor Gates, who previously worked on Us and The Invisible Man, took an unusual approach. He built a death motif out of manipulated baby cries, reverse thunder, and slowed-down metal scrapes. This sound cue, a chilling, almost subliminal hum, recurs moments before every fatal event, subtly priming the audience without overt musical cues. It's the kind of sonic detail that creeps under your skin without ever announcing itself. Then there's the morgue scene, a quieter but no less complex set piece. Shot in a real decommissioned hospital on the outskirts of Atlanta, the sequence required intense coordination between lighting and camera departments. To simulate the flickering fluorescence, the gaffer team used a combination of DMX-controlled LED tubes that could dim, flutter, and pulse in precise patterns. This not only heightened the eerie atmosphere but allowed the actors' reactions to remain genuine, because the environment itself felt truly unstable. Every flicker, every creak in the distance wasn't added in post. It was there on set, haunting the frame. Behind the scenes, Riley McDonald, Liv, and Ryan Harper Gray Mason shared a unique chemistry that carried over from their rehearsals into production. According to reports from the set, director Zach Lipovsky encouraged the two to write character journals, personal diaries from their characters' point of view. These journals helped shape their on-screen dynamic, especially in the water tower scene, where they share a rare moment of peace amid the chaos. The dialogue there, partially improvised and emotionally raw, was drawn directly from their off-camera writing exercises. Another unsung hero of the production was special effects supervisor Alex Nobles, whose team was tasked with crafting some of the most gruesome practical deaths in the series to date. For Elias's jaw impalement, they created a multi-layered prosthetic bust with retractable steel and silicon blood bladders, timed perfectly to erupt as the compressed air burst was triggered. The entire rig had to be reset and cleaned after each take, a painstaking process that took over an hour between shots. But the end result was worth it. A death so brutal and grounded that it left even seasoned crew members visibly shaken during playback. The team's dedication to realism extended to the hardware store scene, where Nicole meets her fate. Rather than rely on green screen, the filmmakers constructed a full-scale replica of a home improvement aisle, complete with working power tools. Safety glass and breakaway props were used, but the dust and sparks were all real. The grinder's accidental spark trail was timed using microcontrolled igniters hidden inside the concrete floor. Actress Jordan Ames wore a light prosthetic beneath her clothes that burst with blood on cue, and the terror on Liv's face as she watched Nicole die wasn't acting. According to McDonald, "We only had one take, and I couldn't stop crying for real afterward. That scene haunted me." One of the film's most surreal shooting experiences came during the storm bunker finale. Built on a soundstage with a fully floodable tank beneath it, the bunker was designed to be airtight and claustrophobic. During rehearsals, a valve malfunction caused the water to rise several inches higher than intended, briefly trapping the actors and crew. Though no one was hurt, the incident left a lasting impact. "It was terrifying," said McDonald, "and it weirdly added to the scene. After that, none of us had to pretend we were scared anymore." Perhaps the most controversial creative decision came with the final nursery scene. Studio executives initially pushed for a clean escape ending. Liv survives, raises her baby, and the cycle is broken. But Lipovsky and screenwriter Laurie Evans-Taylor resisted. They wanted the ending to echo, not resolve. In the final cut, the subtle movement of a baby mobile and the quiet thud of a toy falling reintroduce uncertainty. The cycle, they argued, was not meant to be broken, only understood. That choice, while divisive in test screenings, ultimately gave the film its haunting final note. Technologically, Bloodlines also broke ground with its invisible VFX work. Over 400 visual effects shots were used not to create spectacle, but to enhance practical elements. Small enhancements, a longer shadow here, a flicker of motion in the background there, were layered into scenes to maintain a constant atmosphere of unease. These invisible tweaks made the film feel haunted, as if death itself was always hiding just off-screen. The film also pioneered a new death mapping algorithm, developed by VFX Housecraft Axis in partnership with the stunt coordination team. This software allowed the team to simulate various chain reaction scenarios in real time, adjusting angles, velocities, and impact points to ensure each death scene felt chaotic but believable. The algorithm was especially useful for the fairground disaster and the chain pulley malfunction in the auto shop. It allowed them to pre-visualize complex sequences before committing to expensive setups. Throughout production, the cast and crew bonded over the pressure of upholding the franchise's legacy. Weekly death dinners were held where everyone would gather, review dailies, and vote on their favorite kills. A morbid but morale-boosting tradition that created camaraderie in the midst of all the carnage. These dinners, held under red lighting and catered by local horror-themed food trucks, became legendary among cast and crew. And yet, for all the technical precision and carefully mapped sequences, what ultimately defined Final Destination, Bloodlines behind the scenes, was its beating heart. The filmmakers were telling a story about inevitability, yes, but also about choice, about legacy, and about what it means to try and rewrite a script written in cosmic ink. That energy permeated everything, from the earliest script readings in a candlelit room, to the sleepless nights during storm stage reshoots, to the quiet, eerie calm on the final day of filming when the last line was delivered. It's starting again. The cameras cut. Silence fell. And for just a moment, everyone stood still, caught in the knowledge that they had crafted not just a sequel, but a succession. A film as carefully designed as death's own plan. From its opening sequence to its final haunting image, Final Destination. Bloodlines pulses with more than just dread and destruction. Beneath the carnage and spectacle lies a film preoccupied with inheritance. Not just of genes or family trauma, but of responsibility, guilt, and the deeply human need to find order in chaos. It's a story about what we carry forward, whether we choose to or not. And it's in this emotional and thematic complexity that Bloodlines transcends its genre roots and becomes something quietly profound. At its core, the film explores the inescapability of legacy. The very title, Bloodlines, isn't just a catchy rebranding of a franchise. It's the film's thesis. Death is no longer random, it's hereditary, and that recontextualizes everything. In earlier Final Destination films, characters are pulled into the chain of fate by proximity or chance. But here, fate is baked into their DNA. Liv isn't just a bystander. She's part of a lineage marked by survival and by consequence. Her mother's escape in the infamous 2000s plane explosion, an event implied to be Flight 180, isn't just backstory. It's an origin point, a cursed genesis, and Liv is the unwilling heir. That shift turns Bloodlines into a meditation on intergenerational trauma. What happens when the choices of our parents or their sheer luck become the burdens we must bear? Liv's arc is shaped by this question. Her estrangement from her mother isn't merely emotional. It's symbolic. She has spent her life trying to outrun something she doesn't even fully understand, only to realize that silence and denial don't break the cycle. In this sense, the film becomes a metaphor for the way families bury their pain, passing it down like an invisible inheritance until someone is finally forced to confront it. The film visually reinforces this through its use of circular imagery. Spirals, rings, coils, symbolizing cycles that repeat, destinies that spin like wheels. From the swirling lights of the fair to the twisting steel cable in the auto shop, even the baby mobile in the final shot, the motif is clear. You can't escape what's already in motion. You can only hope to understand it. Yet within that grim inevitability, Bloodlines plants seeds of resistance. Liv's desire to break the pattern, to rewrite death's design, mirrors real-world struggles to sever harmful family patterns, whether it be abuse, addiction, or silence. Her decision to carry the child, to face the cycle head-on rather than abort or run, is complicated and heavy with symbolic weight. It's not framed as hope in a traditional sense. This isn't a feel-good survival story, but it is a form of defiance. A refusal to let fear make her choices for her. The unborn child at the center of this story functions as both literal and symbolic continuation. On one hand, it raises the stakes. If death is hereditary, what kind of life is Liv's child doomed to live? But on the other hand, the baby represents a break in the pattern, not through magical salvation but through awareness. Liv now understands the curse. An understanding, the film seems to suggest, is the first step toward change. The film also wades into existential territory, grappling with questions of determinism versus free will. The death map that Analyse creates, a visual chart of past survivors, connected by red strings and dates, mirrors real-world conspiracy boards, where people attempt to find meaning in the random. It's a direct commentary on our compulsion to find patterns in chaos. Elias becomes consumed by this quest, trying to control what can't be controlled. His descent into obsession reflects the danger of trying to intellectualize grief or trauma rather than confront it emotionally. The map doesn't save him. Knowledge doesn't protect him. His refusal to let go is what ultimately gets him killed. That, too, is symbolic. In Bloodlines, the characters who try to control fate die. The ones who surrender to the unknown, or at least acknowledge it, survive longer. It's a dark echo of the real world, where overplanning and fear-based living often lead to emotional stagnation. In contrast, Liv's evolution from reactive victim to proactive survivor, not of death, but of meaninglessness, is what gives the film its heartbeat. And while the film's metaphysical themes hum quietly beneath the surface, its social commentary strikes a more direct chord. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, society at large has become more conscious of the invisible forces that shape our lives: contagion, fate, randomness. Bloodlines taps into that collective unease. It speaks to the exhaustion of living under the shadow of inherited doom. Whether that doom is economic inequality, climate change, or institutional violence, the feeling is the same: a sense that the previous generation has left behind a ticking time bomb. The idea that death now follows blood rather than accidents reflects this. The characters didn't cause the curse, they were born into it. And that speaks volumes to an audience grappling with inherited crises. The film doesn't offer solutions, but it validates the experience of being born into consequences you didn't create. It gives that experience a shape, a face, a scream. There's also a quiet thread of feminist commentary woven through the film. Liv's body is both a battlefield and a sanctuary. Her pregnancy isn't treated as a plot device but as a source of terrifying vulnerability and immense power. The idea that her child could either break or continue the cycle gives her a terrifying agency. Unlike many horror films that exploit pregnancy as a shock tactic, Rosemary's Baby, The Unborn, Bloodlines gives it narrative weight. Liv's womb becomes the final frontier of death's design, a place where the pattern might finally be disrupted or cemented. The final scene, ambiguous, eerie, yet filled with possibility, feels like a Rorschach test. Some see it as doom: the mobile spinning, the toy falling, the unspoken suggestion that death is already circling. Others see it as defiance, the cycle acknowledged but not yet claimed. Either way, it's a masterclass in thematic ambiguity. It dares the audience to decide what kind of story they just witnessed: a tragedy or the beginning of something new. Symbolically, Bloodlines is rich with foreshadowing and duality. The cracked mirror in Liv's bedroom, reflecting two versions of her face, hints at her inner fracture: the part of her that wants to run and the part that wants to fight. The constant use of reflective surfaces, puddles, glass, chrome, speaks to the theme of self-confrontation. Death is no longer external. It's inside you, in your genes, your memories, your choices. One of the most haunting symbols is the spiral pendant Liv finds among her mother's old things, a subtle callback to the spiral tattoo scene on one of the survivors in a previous installment. Fans of the franchise will remember that the spiral has long been associated with fate and recursion. Here, it serves as a literal family heirloom, passed from mother to daughter. But Liv doesn't wear it. She buries it, a small but powerful act of symbolic rebellion. Even the deaths, as gruesome and inventive as they are, reflect deeper ideas. Elias's death by impalement through the mouth, silencing him, is a grim metaphor for how obsession can mute reason. Nicole's death by tools in the hardware store speaks to the danger of complacency in spaces we assume are safe. And Mason's near-death hallucination, where he sees his own baby being born in a room flooded with water, mirrors his fear of legacy and helplessness in the face of fate. In many ways, Bloodlines operates as a cultural mirror, reflecting a generation haunted by inheritance. It asks, what do we do with the pain we didn't choose? Do we pass it on, or do we confront it? And what does it mean to fight against a force that doesn't care whether we live or die? And yet, for all its symbolism, the film never loses sight of character. Liv's transformation from passive to active, from someone running from her past to someone choosing to face it no matter the cost, is what gives the film its emotional resonance. The social commentary is never didactic. It's embodied, lived through the characters rather than spoken aloud. Even the structure of the film echoes its themes. The deaths don't happen in a predictable order, and that lack of logic mirrors the chaos of real grief. You can't plan for it. You can only survive it. And survival, the film suggests, isn't a matter of outwitting death. It's about living fully, even with the knowledge that your time is limited. Especially with that knowledge. In the end, Final Destination, Bloodlines is more than a horror movie. It's a parable, a myth, a modern-day reckoning with the idea that life, like death, is inherited. That sometimes the scariest part of your story isn't the ending. It's realizing how much of it was already written before you arrived. But maybe, just maybe, there's still time to write your own chapter. From the very first frame of Final Destination, Bloodlines, it's clear this film isn't interested in merely recycling the aesthetic of its predecessors. Director Daniel Stamm reinvents the visual grammar of the franchise with a striking, moody palette and calculated precision that feels more in line with atmospheric thrillers than conventional slashers. The camera doesn't just observe. It stalks, glides, hovers, it participates. It's a voyeur, a predator, and at times, a silent companion to death itself. The cinematography, courtesy of Autumn Durald Arkapaw, builds tension not through chaos, but restraint. Many shots are composed with such surgical symmetry that they evoke dread even before anything happens. The visual stillness before the storm becomes a language all its own. Wide shots linger just long enough to unsettle, often framing characters as small figures within sprawling industrial or suburban spaces, reminding us that they are always at the mercy of a larger, unseen force. One of the most chilling sequences is Liv's nightmare within the ultrasound room. A sterile, familiar setting transformed into a surreal landscape. The camera slowly floats in a circular dolly movement, mimicking the rotation of the sonogram's image as the heartbeat begins to warp into a mechanical ticking. The cold fluorescent lighting gradually shifts to an eerie amber glow, casting shadows that distort the room's dimensions. It's a masterclass in blending realism with psychological horror, pulling the viewer into Liv's disorientation without relying on jump scares or digital trickery. Lighting plays a crucial symbolic role throughout the film. Warm tones are almost entirely absent, reinforcing the feeling that safety is a distant memory. Instead, we get a cold, desaturated palette. Icy blues, muted grays, sickly greens, all suggesting a world devoid of comfort. When warm lighting does emerge, it's often associated with memory or false security. For example, in the flashback sequence of Liv's childhood, when her mother tries to explain the notion of fate using a spiral drawn in the dirt, the scene is bathed in golden hour hues. But as Liv recalls more details, the image subtly fades into the cooler tones of the present, as if the warmth was a lie. The visual language of spirals is baked into the cinematography. Rotational tracking shots recur throughout the film, especially in scenes involving death. When Mason is trapped in the lumber mill, the camera moves in a slow spiral as the blade activates, a disorienting motion that mirrors the pattern of inevitability the characters are caught in. In one particularly haunting moment, a ceiling fan spins lazily above a character just moments before their demise, the camera tilting upward in sync with the fan's rotation before cutting to black. Editing, handled by Jennifer Lilly, is remarkably controlled. Stamm doesn't rush his horror, he lets it simmer. The film resists the fast-cutting, hyperactive pacing of most modern horror. Instead, transitions are often slow dissolves or elliptical cuts that allow the narrative to bleed into dreamlike space. Time is slippery. We move between past and present, hallucination and reality, often without clear markers, a technique that reflects Liv's own unraveling mental state. In this way, the editing itself becomes a kind of psychological weapon, manipulating audience perception as ruthlessly as death manipulates its victims. One of the boldest editorial choices occurs during Elias's death sequence. Rather than showing the fatal moment outright, Stamm withholds it. We get a slow-motion reaction from Liv as she hears the crash from outside, then a hard cut to her entering the scene and seeing the aftermath. The gore is present but secondary. What lingers is the sound, the wet echo of blood dripping onto tile, the humming of the overhead lights, and the silence that follows. It's a jarring subversion of audience expectations, proving that restraint can be more effective than spectacle. Speaking of sound, the film's sound design is among its most effective tools. Sound isn't just an accent, it's an instrument of dread. Composer Joseph Bishara, best known for his work on the Conjuring series, delivers a score that's both organic and industrial. He uses processed samples of metallic creaks, distant alarms, reversed string glissandos, sounds that feel almost mechanical, as though death itself were a machine humming quietly in the background. There's a rhythmic pulse beneath many scenes, not always musical, that mimics a heartbeat or ticking clock. It's never on the nose, but always just loud enough to be felt. This pulse intensifies in moments of looming threat, such as when Nicole walks through the aisles of the hardware store. The music fades out completely, replaced by ambient creaks of tools, footsteps, distant drills. The lack of score makes every sound sharper, more dangerous. Every click of a wrench or roll of a shopping cart feels like a trap ready to spring. Then, just as the accident begins, Bishara's score swoops in. Not with a scream, but with a sickly violin swell that rises like nausea. Stam also utilizes diegetic sound with clever intent. In the fairground sequence, a seemingly harmless carousel melody plays beneath the action, slowly becoming warped and dissonant as the tension rises. The cheerful music continues even after disaster strikes, a sonic reminder that life and death coexist in the same space, sometimes separated only by a breath. It's a nod to the franchise's core irony. The ordinary is always just one step away from obliteration. Visually, Stam directs with a careful eye toward symmetry and misdirection. In many death sequences, the camera emphasizes potential hazards: a frayed wire, a dripping pipe, a loose screw, baiting the viewer into guessing what will trigger the inevitable. But then, with sadistic playfulness, it's something completely different. This manipulation of audience focus becomes a game, one that relies heavily on visual cues and spatial awareness. Cinematographer Arkapaw uses depth of field to guide our attention subtly. The foreground is often in sharp focus while something ominous stirs in the blurry background. A door slowly creaking, a shadow moving just out of frame. One scene that showcases this beautifully is the diner accident. As two characters argue at a booth, we're drawn to their faces, until the camera pushes in slightly, and a coffee pot in the background begins to hiss and bubble over. The tension shifts. Is that the trigger? But then a waitress drops a tray, causing a man to trip, which sends another customer reeling into a rack of cutlery. It's a visual Rube Goldberg machine, and Stam shoots it with the reverence of a magic trick. The final kill isn't a jump scare. It's a punchline, but one crafted with cinematic elegance. The film also makes effective use of architectural space. Unlike earlier entries in the franchise that often leaned on open environments, highways, roller coasters, planes, Bloodlines opts for claustrophobic interiors. Hallways, narrow staircases, garages, nursery rooms. These settings are shot with tight lenses that compress the space, making everything feel closer and more dangerous. The sense of suffocation amplifies the film's thematic focus on inherited trauma. The characters aren't just trapped by fate, but by their environments, their families, their histories. Color theory plays a nuanced role as well. Liv is frequently framed against pale green and white backgrounds, clinical, sterile hues that evoke both hospital settings and emotional numbness. As the film progresses, the colors darken around her. After Elias's death, her wardrobe shifts subtly from washed-out tones to deeper grays and blacks. It's a visual metaphor for her transformation, from passive to active, from detached to determined. The director's use of mirrors and reflections is also worth noting. Almost every major character has at least one moment in front of a reflective surface, often just before or after a turning point. These shots are rarely centered. Instead, characters are shown at a skewed angle, fragmented, doubled, incomplete. These visuals reinforce the film's obsession with duality. Life versus death, choice versus fate, past versus present. Liv's final confrontation with herself, shot in the bathroom mirror, where she speaks aloud the names of the dead, is given no musical score, just the dripping faucet and her ragged breath. It's her clearest moment of self-recognition, and Stam shoots it like a funeral. What elevates Final Destination? Bloodlines is not just its technical precision, but its emotional resonance. Every visual and sonic decision is made in service of character and theme. There's nothing gratuitous. Even the blood, when it appears, feels almost ceremonial, an exorcism of unspoken grief. Stam isn't trying to scare us so much as make us feel the weight of inevitability. And he does it not by shouting, but by whispering, in shadows, in silences, in glances. The film's closing sequence is its most restrained, and therefore, its most powerful. No dramatic music, no monologue, just Liv, sitting in a rocking chair, her hand resting on her stomach, listening. The mobile turns slowly above her, a spiral of tiny birds circling on wires. The camera doesn't move. It lingers, then cuts to black. And in that stillness, you hear it, the faintest sound of creaking like wood giving way, or maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. There's an invisible pulse running through Final Destination. Bloodlines, and it doesn't just come from the ticking time bomb of fate or the orchestra of accidents orchestrated by death. It comes from the characters. The performances feel unusually grounded for a franchise built on the inevitability of destruction. There's a subtle humanity woven into this film, and that's largely due to the electric chemistry of its cast. A blend of veterans, rising stars, and new blood who seem to understand that their characters' connection is the audience's anchor in a world of uncertainty. Precisely crafted ballet of dread. It's a visual and emotional showcase that tells you, this isn't just about how people die. It's about how they live knowing what's coming. What follows is a carefully measured blend of horror, myth, and emotional character drama. Every encounter with death's design becomes a test, not just of survival but of meaning. Why them? Why now? Why again? Liv's unraveling leads her to an unearthing of her family's past, tying her fate not just to her choices, but to the legacy she's inherited. That multi-generational echo gives Bloodlines a richness previous entries only hinted at. And then there's Ellis, the mortician, whose performance by Harold Perrineau will be remembered as one of the franchise's most chilling and poetic reinventions. He doesn't just deliver exposition, he delivers philosophy. Each word is measured, filled with suggestion and shadow. Through him, the film blurs the line between human knowledge and cosmic knowledge, making us wonder if death truly is a force of nature, or something more conscious, something aware. But perhaps the film's greatest strength lies in its restraint. Where earlier films relished in spectacle, Bloodlines thrives in silence. Pauses when others would accelerate. It allows grief to simmer, to stretch across scenes. One of the most powerful moments comes not with screams, but with a quiet conversation between Liv and Mason. Sitting in the childhood attic, surrounded by dusty boxes, spirals etched into old journals. There, we witness what horror rarely captures: the weight of remembering. Stylistically, the movie is a masterclass in modern horror minimalism. The use of light and shadow isn't just atmospheric. It's thematic. The ever-present motif of the spiral recurs not just visually, but sonically, with subtle sound design echoing circular patterns and rhythms. Cinematographer Autumn Durald Arkapaw brings an almost Terrence Malick-like intimacy to the frame, capturing natural beauty and existential threat in equal measure. And the score, hauntingly subtle, pulses beneath the surface like fate itself. Steady, creeping, inescapable. These elements, taken together, elevate the film far beyond its franchise origins. Bloodlines dares to ask questions most horror films avoid. What do we owe to the people we lose? Can you ever really outrun your family's history? And when death isn't just random, but personal, how do you find meaning in the time you have left? But the impact of the film doesn't stop at the screen. As we've explored, its cultural resonance has been extraordinary. From critical acclaim to academic discussion, from social media virality to fan-generated art and theories, Bloodlines has become more than a movie. It's a phenomenon. A piece of horror that not only reignited a franchise but redefined it. It's a rare thing when a sequel becomes a turning point. Rarer still when it becomes the turning point. In many ways, Bloodlines has done for Final Destination what Dr. Sleep did for The Shining, or what Creed did for Rocky. It didn't replace or remake the original. It built upon it, honored it, gave it new life, and it did so by trusting the audience. Trusting them to sit with uncomfortable truths. Trusting them to engage with symbolism. Trusting them to feel rather than just react. That trust is why the film hits so hard, and why it lasts. Because that's the thing about fate. You can't see it, you can't predict it, but when a story connects with something deep inside you, something unspoken, that's fate too. The fate of a film meant to find you when you least expect it, meant to say something you didn't know you needed to hear. Final Destination. Bloodlines isn't just a movie about death. It's a movie about stories. About the stories we inherit, the ones we carry, and the ones we leave behind. It's about how life spirals, not in straight lines, but in echoes. And every choice we make, every breath we take, bends the path just a little more. So whether you're a longtime fan of the franchise, or a newcomer pulled in by curiosity, what you've just experienced is a story that dares to be more. A film that proves horror can still surprise us, still move us, still evolve. And if this deep dive into Final Destination, Bloodlines has resonated with you, if you found something in this story that made you pause, made you think, or just made you feel a little less alone in the chaos, then this journey was worth it. There are more stories to tell, more films to explore, more spirals to trace. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button. It lets us know you want more of these immersive journeys. Subscribe so you never miss a dive into the next film that's waiting to be rediscovered. And drop a comment. Tell us what you saw in Bloodlines, what theories you believe, what moments shook you, what stayed with you long after the credits rolled. Because this isn't just a breakdown, it's a conversation. And somewhere in the dark corners of cinema, the next spiral is already forming. We'll be there to trace it with you,